This video will review the use of the SBK-1 suspension bearing kit. Bicycle suspension linkage bearings take a lot of punishment and impacts during riding. As things wear out, the suspension linkage will become slower and sometimes notchy. The bearings must be removed from the linkage in order to install the new ones. The SBK-1 suspension bearing kit provides a system of guides driven by a bearing pressing tool to remove and install bearings. The first step is to remove the linkage from the bike. Take note of which bolts go where as you disassemble. To begin, we'll select the correct extractor cup or drift and extractor stud by measuring both the ID and OD of the bearing being removed. The bearing will be pressed into the linkage. Consequently, it is difficult to take a direct measurement of the OD. Use the inner jaws of a caliper and measure the bore of the linkage between the seat. Cross-reference the OD with table number 1 in your instructions to find your extractor cup or drift. Select the extractor stud by using the bearing ID from table number 2 in your instructions. The extractor cup should be a bit larger than the OD of the bearing. The purpose of the cup is to catch the bearing as it is extracted, and so it needs to fit around the outside of the bearing in the linkage. Install the cup on the shaft of the tool. Now install the small end of the extractor stud on the opposite side of the bearing. Install the tool shaft through the bearing and through the extractor stud. Install the back plate onto the shaft. If the linkage design is not wide enough for the back plate to fit inside, use the included extender, part number 2786, over the shaft and then install the back plate outside of the linkage. Hold the shaft and turn the handle until the extractor stud contacts the bearing. Check the alignment of the tool on the bearing. Insert a 5mm hex tool into the end of the shaft. Turn the handle until the bearing is fully removed from its pivot housing. The SBK-1 cup or extractor needs about 3mm of flat linkage surface to properly support the pulling process. If the linkage lacks that flat surface, you'll need to use an alternative method, such as the SHX-1 bearing slide hammer. Additionally, if there's no access to the backside of the bearing, the SHX-1 should be used. When installing a new bearing, begin by preparing the press surfaces. Check with your frame manufacturer to see what they require for frame prep. If no information is available, lubricate the surface with grease. If a poor press fit is suspected, use a retaining compound such as RC1. To select the correct drift, begin by measuring the outside diameter. Refer to table number 1 in your instructions. Place the drift onto the tool shaft. Now select a bearing pilot that is small enough to slip inside the bearing. Slide the bearing pilot onto the shaft. Finally, slide the bearing onto the shaft over the pilot. Guide the pressing tool shaft with the bearing through the opening of the bearing housing. Slide the back plate of the pressing tool onto the nearest slot of the shaft. Hold the shaft and turn the handle until the bearing and back plate contact. Check the alignment of the bearing. If the back plate is not sitting flat and squarely on the linkage, the bearing may not press squarely. To prevent this, select another drift from the opposite side. Pick one that matches best. This will act as a guide for the shaft. You may need to use the extension to engage the back plate before pressing. Insert a 5mm hex tool into the end of the shaft and turn the handle clockwise until the bearing is fully pressed into its housing. SBK-1 provides the tools and pieces you need to service many linkage designs. However, it is still necessary to understand the nature of the press fit design you're working with, and you may need to get creative. Now have a suspenseful and smooth bearing day. Keep your linkage running smooth and it will take care of those bumps in the trail of life.
Thanks for watching. You can find hundreds more videos like this one on our channel here on YouTube. And we're constantly working on more. So be sure to subscribe for the latest content for Park Tool. And check out our website, which has even more content to help you make your bike better.